Groups, frames, auto layout frames, and what is the difference? Here I have a group called group 1, and inside I have two text layers. So two text layers are grouped. Here I have a frame called frame 1, and inside I have two text layers, and I have auto layout frame 1, also two text layers inside. Let me show you the difference between group 1 and frame number 1. Let's forget about auto layout frame just for now. Let's talk about groups and frames. So if I select group 1, I have all the options on the right side. If it's listed there, I can do it. Now let's select frame 1. I have all the options on the right side. And if it's listed there, I can also do it. What I did here, I selected group 1 and I took a screenshot and pasted here below. I did the same thing with frame and auto layout frame, but we're talking about groups and frames, or group 1 and frame 1 here. I'm going to select pencil and let's check the difference. This part is the same here. So there's no difference. This part is the same, right? This piece is the same. Corner radius is different. And clip content is different. And this one is the same. This is the same. We have auto layout option here. We have auto layout option here. Layout grid, it's new. Layer, it is the same. Fill. Okay, now it's set to black. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Here, there's no fill, but we have an option. Stroke is the same. And last three options are the same. Great. Now I'm going to select I'm going to select this, and delete. And I'm going to delete this one as well. All right. So on the frame, we have an option to set the corner radius, to clip the content, and add layout grid. And here we don't have those three options. Note that group 1, frame 1, and auto layout frame 1 is created on empty space. It's not part of any layout. Let's get back to group 1. Okay, I'm going to select group 1, and you can see on the right side that fill is set to black. Let's change the fill to red. And what happens? The text color now is set to red. If I select frame 1 and add fill and change to red, the text layers are set to black, but the background now is set to red, meaning that adding fill here on the right side doesn't affect text layers. And here, since it's grouped, all you can do is change text layers color here on the right side, but you can't change the background. For example, if I add new color, it doesn't matter. We are still talking about text layers inside because text layers are grouped, and of course it's called group 1. If you want to add background, you have to draw a rectangle and place it here on group 1, just below the text, and drag it here and change the color. And this is the old school way, but you can't do it just like that. Okay, let's go back to black. Okay, I need to remove this. Great. Now let's talk about frame 1 and auto layout frame 1. Auto layout or auto layout frame is still a frame, but with additional options on the right side. That is the difference. We usually say auto layout, but auto layout is auto layout frame because it is still a frame. I'm going back to pencil and let's check the difference between frame number 1 and auto layout frame number 1. This part is the same. This is the same. Here we have a new option. This one is the same. Here we have new option. The same. And here we have new option. Okay, we can add auto layout on this frame. So we don't need this. And here we have auto layout option here on the right side. Layout grid, we have it, so it's the same. Layer option, it is the same. Fill stroke, okay, so everything else is the same. Okay, I'm going to delete now and we are going to talk about the difference. Let's get back to frame number 1. Here we have an option to set this frame to a horizontal or vertical value, and we can also set here the space gap. Now it's set to 86, so we can increase or decrease. That's an option. Let's check auto layout frame. Here we have a new option, horizontal and vertical values. Now it's set to hug and hug, so it's auto layout option. And here this huge section is dedicated to auto layout. And we have some options here which I'm not going to discuss now because it looks quite simple and maybe not that complicated, but believe you me, it's super complicated. Sure, you can create a button in a few seconds and you can create a simple card, but auto layout is very complicated and it takes quite some time to learn. In summary, you can see that the difference between group 1 and frame 1 is marked in red color, and the difference between frame 1 and auto layout frame 1 is marked in green color. And you can see visually what's the difference, although I haven't marked fill because as I showed before, on group 1 fill is for text layers, and on frame and auto layout frame 1 fill is for the background. So that's the difference. Let's move on and see how groups, frames, and auto layout frames behave in more realistic setting. Here I have a frame called desktop 1. Let's expand on the left side, and here is group number 2, in the middle frame number 2, and here I have auto layout frame number 2. Design auto layout, this is design frame, and this is design group, as written here up top. And what I did, I selected each and took new screenshots and pasted below each object. And now we're going to check the difference between those objects, just like we did before. Let's start from group number 2 and frame number 2. What is the difference? This is the same. Here it is the same. This is new. This is the same. We have this. Okay, new, clip content. Okay, this one is the same. Auto layout option is the same. We have constraints, layer. Okay, it is the same. Layout grid, it's different. Okay, fill, just like before, so we can delete this. We already talked about this, and it is the same right here. Okay, I'm going to clean it up right now. Frame 2 is selected. Let's check what is the difference. So we can still set to portrait or landscape. We have this option, which is called resize to fit. We have corner radius. We have independent, I think it's called independent. Yes, independent corners. We can clip content and we can add layout grid. So pretty much the same, just like before. Now let's check the difference between frame number 2 and auto layout frame number 2. This and this. Okay, I'm going to select pencil. This part is the same. It is the same. Same. This is the difference. Okay, this part is the same. This is new. This part is the same. This one too. Clip content, the same. This is new. Auto layout. Okay, so we can add auto layout, and here is the main piece. Constraints the same, and layout grid the same, and here it is up to the stroke the same. Okay, so it's pretty much the same. Okay, now I'm going to clean it up. As you can see, the difference is pretty much the same, just like before. However, there is a new section which is called constraints on group number 2, frame number 2, and auto layout frame number 2. And let's go back here, and here we didn't have this option called constraints, just because we added group frame and auto layout frame on this huge desktop one frame. And once you add something, you have the option which is called new section, which is called constraints. But we are not going to talk about that. That is the main difference. But if you check here, it's pretty much the same. It doesn't matter if you place it on a frame or just on empty space. The only difference that you can instantly see it's the section called constraints, and everything else remains the same, pretty much, right? The question is, if it's that similar, if groups and frames and auto layout frames look quite similar, why should you bother and which one to use? Let's move on to desktop to group example number 1 frame. Let's expand, and here I have a section. Let's pretend it's a text layer. Here is another text section, and here below I have an image of an alien which I sketched in a few seconds. Some waves, maybe heat waves, I don't know. I just sketched something without thinking. And let's say I want to move this image up top. If I select one, I have to move one by one, and it's not an option. I can select all and move up, and it's great. But the problem is that if you look on the left side, I have too many layers. Okay, let's move back. But if I select all and group, now it's under group 3, and I can move around and it works great. I don't need fill, so I don't have to worry about this section fill because it doesn't work. If I set to red, nothing happens because it's not a frame. Remember, if you want to add background, you have to add a shape and change the color, but I don't need to worry about that. And using groups in this scenario is quite alright with me. Let's check desktop 3 group example number 2 frame. I'm going to expand on the left side, and as you can see, I have a star, ellipse, rectangle, and I created a mesh gradient here, because if I select a star 1 and go under effects here on the right side, I have layer blur set to 400. Let's go back to 0, and I have a star, and if I set to 400, it is blurred and you can't see star anymore. Same goes for ellipse number 1. The blur was set to 400, and rectangle here. And using groups is quite a viable option here. I can select all three and right click, choose group selection. Now it's grouped and I can move around. I can create a duplicate, move down here, create another. Okay, I'm going to zoom out, move down here, and I can play around with gradients here, and so on and so on. So I can do different things. And using groups is quite an option. It really depends. Sometimes you still want to put it in a frame. For example, I can show what clip content means. If I deselect this mesh gradient goes outside the frame. But if I choose clip content, now the gradient is constrained by the frame. This is what it is. So grouping is quite useful in this case, but let's finalize and talk about groups, frames, and auto layout frames in general, and which one should you use. Groups are the simplest form of organizing content. This is why I showed two examples, one with alien and one with mesh gradient. So groups are quite limited. Frames, on the other hand, are quite advanced compared to groups. Frames can be used for responsive design. You can change background color. You can do more with frames. And generally speaking, frames are used for organizing content. Now, when it comes to auto layout frame, it's an advanced form of frame, meaning that it works really well if you are designing a responsive layout or a responsive object. And even if you are not designing a responsive object or layout, auto layout still works way better than a frame, because you can set gaps, padding easier compared to a simple frame. When I am designing something, I have to be honest, I used groups for everything, or randomly use frames, because I don't want to be constrained and think too much about the structure. I am creating something new, but once I am finished, then I start to reorganize and introduce frames, structure, auto layout frames. Depends what I'm creating, but I move to frames and auto layout frames. And I abandon groups and leave groups only if it's absolutely necessary. You should think about groups as the past, as something simple. Try sticking with frames and auto layout frames, and use groups only if it's absolutely necessary. And your client, and especially the programmer, will thank you for sure. That's it, I am going.